What a head, son! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys through the ultimate guide to Game Week 5. So a lot has happened in Game Week 4. Hopefully it was a good game week for you guys and you managed to get a green arrow. But as I said, lots has happened in Game Week 4. We have injury news, we have suspensions due to red cards. So Antonio and Dominic Calvert-Lewin are going to take up the majority of the talking points in this ultimate guide. We will, however, still have the usual stuff, the watch list, the captaincy, the best fixtures from a defensive and an attacking point of view. So yes, we still will have all that good stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So yes, it is that time of year again. We do have the introduction of European football back into our calendars. Fortunately, as a football fan, really happy that the Champions League, the Europa League are back. But unfortunately, as an FPL manager, this does introduce some more problems. So the first one is going to be the injury news. So obviously if a player does get injured in the Europa League fixtures, the Champions League fixtures, and now I think we even have this new Conference League, you guys just have to keep your eyes on that to make sure that the players in your FPL team aren't getting injured in the European football that is going to happen in the midweeks. The next one is going to be rotation. Now I don't think at this early stage of the group stages, I don't think there'll be too much rotation, as I think most sides will generally just find their feet, try and get as many points as possible. I think at the latter stages of the groups we might see some more rotation coming in as the teams try to qualify for these knockout stages. So in terms of rotation, I wouldn't worry too much, as if you put too much power in it, you kind of get distracted from other FPL decisions. So just try to enjoy the Champions League football, the Europa League football, and the Conference League football for what it is, and just keep your eyes on your FPL players to make sure that they don't get injured or play too many minutes. Now going on to the watch list, and we do have 3 new introductions into the watch list for Game Week 5. It was actually quite an interesting talking point that Game Week 4's watch list, I think basically all of the 3 players that are highlighted there managed to find their way into my Game Week 4 team as I look to take a -8 hit. So quite a few players coming in, almost a mini wild card. We'll see if that managed to pay off in the team selection coming up either tomorrow or on Thursday afternoon. But the 3 players that have been introduced into my lineup for this week's watch list are going to be Tomiyasu, Rafinha, and then also Mason Mount. So starting off with the cheapest player on the watch list, Tomiyasu for Arsenal, the new signing. I think he signed from the Bundesliga, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but comes in super cheap at 4.5 million. And you might be asking me, why am I going for a 4.5 Arsenal defender when we already have Ben White that is quite cheap? I think currently 4.3 after a couple of price drops. But the thing about Tomiyasu is that he played at that right back position for Arsenal against Norwich. Now I thought that he actually initially was a centre back, but it does seem like he can play as a full back and had a relatively good game, to be honest. And you guys know me, in terms of FPL, I love my defenders to be fullbacks, so that's why when a 4.5 option comes from a team like Arsenal, although they haven't been performing that well, I do think with these nice upcoming fixtures, might be a 4.5 to keep your eyes on. That's why in terms of the watch list, comes in here as a nice cheap option that we might be looking at in the next couple of game weeks. The next 2 players are very familiar to us FPL managers. The first one, Rafinha from Leeds. And just in terms of those lovely Leeds fixtures coming up, a little bit of a spoiler, we will be focusing on those Leeds fixtures in another talking point. You probably know which one I'm talking about. But in terms of Rafinha, really nice option at 6.5 million. I personally think he was underpriced at the start of the season. So I really am happy with paying 6.5 for the Brazilian international, just because I think he's such a good option. And with lovely fixtures, Leeds always kind of return from an attacking point of view. So I am keeping my eyes on him for a little bit. I might actually look to bring him in prior to Game Week 5, just because I think those Leeds fixtures are great, and I would rather jump on the Rafinha bandwagon before it gathers too much steam. Now the last player you might be questioning a little bit here, because Chelsea's fixtures over the next 2 aren't that great. I actually looked at their fixture for Game Week 5 and they are facing Spurs, which I don't even know if we can classify as a tough fixture. Even though they did have 10 men, they still did concede 3 to Crystal Palace. So I think Chelsea are definitely favourites going into that one. So I mean, Mason Mount could get some returns, or maybe even Lukaku could get some returns. But I am monitoring Mason Mount just because he was benched on the weekend. It's a little bit of a weird one. Against Aston Villa, Tuchel opted to go for Ziyech, Havertz, and then also Lukaku in that front 3. They seem to play like a little bit of a triangle front 3 with 2 cams and then 1 striker that to kind of rotate around that department. So Mason Mount usually accompanies Kai Havertz and Lukaku, but obviously with Ziyech coming back from that injury, had a relatively good preseason. So that's why it looked like the Chelsea manager opted for the Moroccan instead of the English midfielder. So I'm monitoring that situation, as I would like to have my Chelsea option be a little bit more nailed. So I'm going to be looking in the Champions League, maybe looking in Game Week 5, Game Week 6 to just see if Mason Mount is as nailed as we might be expecting. There are other players on my watch list, but I thought that I would rather talk about these 3 different options and then talk about the forwards later on when we look at Antonio and Calvert-Lewin replacements. So we're going to switch things around quickly and talk about the fixtures earlier on instead of later on, and then focus on the big talking points coming up next. So from an attacking point of view, what I went and did was I went over to fantasyfootballfix.com and I went to their fixture analyzer and I got both the attacking and the defensive fixtures. Just for Game Week 5, obviously, as this is the Game Week 5 Ultimate Guide. So starting off with attacking ratings, and I won't lie, I was a little bit surprised at the ratings that I managed to see. So starting off, we have Norwich versus Watford. I wouldn't have predicted this one in a million years to be the best attacking rating, but obviously the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm thinks that this is quite a good fixture. I don't know how I feel about that. I probably would have put it a little bit down, especially when you look at that second place position of Man City versus Southampton. So in prior experience, I always think that Man City absolutely thrashed Southampton. This might be true, this might be false, this might just be my Man City goggles on, as I always do like to own them in these fixtures that I think Man City will do quite well in. So I think this game is going to be quite one-sided, quite sided to the blue side of this fixture, and I really do favour Man City. Unfortunately, it's just that case with that Pep roulette. We kind of never know who's going to start, who's going to be benched, and that's why I don't think we can kind of look at too many options in terms of this starting 11. So maybe you guys want to go for a Timo Pukki, a Cantwell, those sort of players against Watford, as this could be kind of a promotion clash and we could see quite a high scoring affair, and I think maybe the algorithm is just favouring this because it is a home fixture for Norwich against Watford. As I said, I wouldn't probably rate it as highly. I think a fixture like a Liverpool versus Crystal Palace should be higher than a Norwich versus Watford, but I mean maybe the algorithm's going to be right and then I could look like I made quite a bad call on that one. But Liverpool Crystal Palace, 100% the fixture I think most managers will target, especially in terms of captaincy coming up a little bit later on. But I just think because this is at Anfield, great fixture to kind of go by. Although Crystal Palace had a great game against Spurs, it was against 10 men and I don't think Liverpool will give them as many chances. The Newcastle Leeds fixture comes up next with the algorithm slightly favouring Newcastle. I think this is because it is a home fixture for Newcastle instead of Leeds, but I think this game could be quite a high scoring one to be honest, and I am slightly favouring Leeds, but if you guys do have a Newcastle attacker, maybe this is quite a good game to play them in. The rest of the fixtures kind of filter down a little bit. We have Watford versus Norwich, then again we have Brighton, Leicester. Wolves in my opinion have quite a good game against Brentford. Brentford have good stats from a defensive point of view, but I think the teams they have faced have been on the slightly easier side of things. So I do think Wolves, with that hectic XG that they do create, will be on the receiving end of hopefully some attacking returns. The rest of the fixtures are quite predictable and we kind of get into areas where you might not be getting that high scoring affairs, whereas I think focus on the top 7 and you should be getting some returns. Now going on to the defensive rating, so these are teams that you guys should be focusing on for those clean sheet odds, and you can see the first team there is going to be Wolves versus Brentford. Now I actually thought that Brentford would be a little bit more solid going forward in this Premier League season, but unfortunately that hasn't generally been the case. Now they might improve slightly over the upcoming game weeks, but I am really favouring a Wolves clean sheet to be honest. And the nice thing about those Wolves fullbacks, we saw on the weekend Semedo, Marcel actually hauling, but Semedo could quite easily have gotten a goal or two, so I do think that those fullbacks offer that attacking and that defensive threat, which is going to be excellent, and as I always like to say, absolute FPL gold. Norwich vs Watford coming up here as another defensive rating. Now if you guys do own a Brandon Williams and Omobad Madeli, maybe consider playing them as the algorithm is favouring a Norwich clean sheet in that fixture. Watford Norwich comes up next though, so this game is either going to be high scoring or very low scoring. I don't really know what the algorithm is going to kind of predict. It has both of these as quite good attacking and defensive ratings, so I guess this fixture is definitely the most unpredictable game to kind of call. Coming up next, Brentford Wolves, which is also quite weird. We have kind of 4 teams at the top here, but 2 fixtures only, but I definitely think that a Liverpool Crystal Palace game should be where you guys are targeting for maybe a clean sheet. Arsenal Burnley going under the radar. We spoke about those Arsenal fixtures with Tomiyasu, great fixtures coming up for them, and I also favour that Man City versus Southampton game for maybe a Diaz or Laporte clean sheet. So now going on to the most anticipated talking point and the main talking point of this video, I first want to just talk to you guys about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So I'm actually recording this video on Monday evening, but I have had the news that DCL has been kind of out of the starting 11, out of the bench as well, because he has broken his toe and also had a quad injury. So kind of a double up there in terms of the injuries, and Rafa Benitez has come out tonight and said that he should be out for about 2 to 3 weeks or even longer than that. So if you guys are an owner of a DCL, unfortunately I do think you guys should be shipping him on because I don't think he's going to play in the foreseeable future. So that does link to this talking point about Antonio, because we obviously will be talking about some replacements that you guys can consider for both of these strikers, and because they both come in at the same price, can kind of combine those 2 talking points into one mega talking point. So then going on to Antonio, and we'll be kind of elaborating on this talking point for a little bit longer than we did the DCL one, because it's not so cut and dry as an injury. Antonio is only suspended for one fixture after picking up 2 yellow cards on the weekend against Southampton. So you know the suspension for 2 yellow cards, not as severe as a straight red, and Antonio will be back for game week 6 where he does face Leeds away. So what I also did and what I want to drag your attention to is the projected points. So I went over to Fantasy Football Fix and I changed the fixtures from game week 5 to game week 12, and I saw the predicted points for Antonio as well as the options that I will be comparing him to. So you guys can see here from game week 5 to game week 12, Antonio is projected to score 37.1 points, which is an average of 46 points per game that he actually is going to be playing. So I kind of didn't sort him for the game week 5 fixture because he is suspended. What I wanted to show you guys is the average points that he is projected to score over the games that he is fit to play, and then you can kind of do a comparison between the options that are coming up and maybe your own projected points model that you have created. So in terms of Antonio, he's currently 7.9 million, but I'm pretty sure most of you guys already own him. And if you don't own him, I still think he's quite good value for money at 7.9. Now, would I bring him in? I don't think I would. I think I would maybe give it one more game week, kind of assess the Europa League. And I think if you guys are owners of Antonio, I would also be assessing the Europa League, or at least keeping an eye on it, because there has been some rumors that there will be some heavy rotation for West Ham between the Premier League and the Europa League. That squad is quite thin in terms of the striker position, so I really wouldn't be surprised if Antonio was completely rested for the Europa League and simply played the Premier League, as we do know him and his hamstrings aren't the strongest, so I am expecting him to kind of get monitored in terms of the minutes. But now, should you sell Antonio, or should you simply bench him and just start a player off your bench if they have a good fixture? Now, I just kind of answered that question for you because it's really subjective. If you guys do have an option on your bench that can simply just come on, play the full 90 minutes and maybe get some FPL returns, I would probably be looking at that. For my own personal team, I can simply just bring on Luke Ayling. Has a nice fixture against Newcastle away. Now, Newcastle had quite a high attacking rating against Leeds, so maybe not the best chance for a clean sheet, but I still do think that fixture is viable to get some FPL points, especially because it is a fullback and he still does have that attacking threat. Now, if you guys are an owner of a Brandon Williams and Omar Madeli, I don't know how confident I would be in playing that option, as I don't think the odds of a clean sheet for Norwich are that high, but I have seen some FPL teams with great benches, so if you guys do have an option on the bench, especially with DCL out currently, I might heavily consider just keeping Antonio, because he does face Leeds in game week 6 and then also has Brentford in game week 7. Now, the fixtures aren't that great from then onwards, so it might be a little bit of a debate of fixtures here. If you want a long-term option, maybe consider him, but I know a lot of managers are considering the wild card in game week 7 or game week 8, so I would just simply keep Antonio, because if he does play, he scores FPL points. Now, I know this might be quite a contradiction because he didn't score points against Southampton, he actually got negative points, but I just think every FPL option is entitled to a bad game week, especially when they come in below 8 million. So to really create a consensus of should you sell him or should you keep him, I'm going to be going over some options that you guys can consider, and we might do a little bit of a comparison between them and then finally do a conclusion of should you sell Antonio or should you keep him. But as I said, if you don't have any bench options, I would probably look at selling him, as there are some strikers with some great fixtures, but if you can simply have a good bench fixture, then simply play that option and keep Antonio firmly rooted to third on your bench. So the first replacement for DCL and Bamford is going to be Raul Jimenez from Wolves. Now, the only thing that's kind of holding Raul Jimenez back is the fact that he hasn't got any attacking returns this FPL season. Now, he did have a very long-term hip injury, so I'm giving him a little bit of benefit of the doubt there and just hoping that he can get back to the form that he was in prior seasons, and then he should be a perfectly fine option at 7.4 million. And the thing about Wolves is those amazing fixtures that they do have in the upcoming future, and these even extend to the medium term. So not only in the short term, they have great fixtures. In the medium term, they look quite strong. And to be honest, Wolves have really been impressing me. I know that they lost the first 3 games, but they did lose them only 1-0, and they created a boatload of chances in those fixtures. So I do think they were quite unlucky to actually lose those. We saw on the weekend them getting a clean sheet and some attacking returns. So I think they are kind of finding their feet. And with these easier fixtures, I'm expecting Wolves to go on quite a good run and score a couple of goals and keep a couple clean sheets. Obviously, the clean sheets don't really rely on Raul Jimenez. You're only kind of looking at goals and assists, and unfortunately in terms of projected points, because of a relatively slow start to the FPL season, his projected points aren't looking too good. 25.9 points, and just remember that he does have an extra fixture than Antonio to rack up some points. So I mean, just look at those comparisons, 39.1 to 25.9. Unfortunately, the algorithm really doesn't favor Raul Jimenez over the opening couple game weeks, and that's how I would classify him as more of a punt. I think in terms of the transfer that I would do for Antonio, I would probably look a little bit more safety, because Antonio is just such a good option, so I would rather want a steady stream of points than maybe a little bit of a volatile Raul Jimenez at this stage of the season. So maybe a little bit of a watch and see for me, but I do think if you guys want to take a punt, don't have a Wolves attacker, I would really be looking at the Mexican international as my kind of DCL or Antonio replacement. Also, something to take into consideration is that if you guys are wildcarding game week 8, game week 7, you might as well just take a little bit of a punt on Raul Jimenez because the next 3 fixtures, I don't think there's any better fixtures in terms of other Premier League teams. So although his predicted points aren't that high, I still think it might be worth taking a look at Raul Jimenez for your Antonio or DCL replacement. But now going on to my personal favorite DCL / Antonio replacement, it's going to be none other than Patrick Bamford from Leeds. Now this might be a little bit of a predictable one, and unfortunately there aren't too many options around this 8 million kind of price point, so I think I've basically covered the majority of them. But in terms of replacing Antonio and DCL, I 100% would recommend Bamford if you want to go for them. 100% DCL to Bamford as he is injured, but Antonio, as I said, it's a little bit harder to predict that one, but when you do look at those Leeds fixtures coming up, they look simply sensational. So the only fixture that might be a little bit tough there is game week 6 against West Ham, but this is a Leeds home fixture, and if you guys did watch the fixture against Liverpool on the weekend, the Leeds support was simply outstanding, so I reckon that's going to be real fuel to the tank, and I think at least from an attacking point of view, Leeds will score a couple in these next few game weeks. In terms of price, Bamford comes in at 7.9 million. So currently the same price as Antonio, but I'm pretty sure you guys would have bought Antonio when he was 7.5. And in terms of projected points by fantasyfootballfix.com, he's projected to score slightly less than Antonio with 36.5. So this is why I'm kind of recommending Bamford, because in terms of form, might not have the best of form. Leeds haven't been that great at the start of the season, but in terms of projected points and fixtures, Bamford is your go-to man as a replacement for those other 2 strikers. I think he's 100% nailed, and it seems to be that Rodrigo, instead of replacing Bamford, is currently rotating within the wing and the midfielder positions. Now we do have Dan James, but we don't really know who he's going to play, but I really don't think it's going to be Bamford that sacrifices his striker position so that these other options can get in the starting 11. To be fair, I actually don't think he had a bad game against Liverpool. Had a couple of runs in behind Virgil and a Matip, but I just think unfortunately got caught off sides a few times, and I don't think he's going to come up against those 2 centre backs anytime soon, so I wouldn't really be too worried about those fixtures. So 100% my recommendation would be, if you guys want to replace DCL, want to replace Antonio, look at Bamford, as I do think he's my favorite replacement for those other 2. So the final talking point we're going to be going over is all about captaincy. So first of all, as we usually do it, I'm going to be giving you guys my 3 recommendations and my 3 favorite options, and the next talking point will be looking at the projected points or the highest projected point scorers for game week 5. So going over my options, I'm going to be going over my kind of differential option first, which is going to be Kevin De Bruyne from Man City. I spoke about that Southampton fixture, great fixture on paper. I reckon Man City will be quite dominant in this one, and with Kevin De Bruyne getting on the bench on the weekend, I think he's going to be near back to fitness, and we can just monitor that Champions League game to see if the Belgium international is back to full fitness. So from a differential point of view, go for Kevin De Bruyne if you guys do own him, but I don't think there's too many players that do own a Man City asset. If you guys own other Man City options like a Mahrez, a Jesus, Ferran Torres, those are perfectly fine, but I consider them to be quite risky in terms of Pep Roulette. The next option is going to be Ronaldo after a really good, strong performance against Newcastle. Now this is an away fixture against West Ham, which is probably the reason why I won't be captaining Ronaldo, just because I think West Ham defensively, although this season haven't been that great, on paper they usually are quite good. So unfortunately Ronaldo won't be my captain for game week 5. My captain for game week 5, a little bit of a no-brainer here, probably your captain as well, is going to be Mo Salah versus Crystal Palace. So home fixture, so at Anfield, great support I'm expecting, and I do think Mo Salah should be on the receiving end of some attacking returns. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction or the kind of watch list, Crystal Palace had a relatively good game against Spurs, but they won't be playing against 10 men, at least hopefully against Liverpool, and I am expecting quite a comfortable result for the Liverpool side of things. So now going on to the Fantasy Football Fix projected points, and the reason why I didn't really go on other options from Liverpool that you guys can consider, it's because I'm going to be talking about Sadio Mane here. Now Jota could be an option that you guys do look at, but I think if you own Salah, might as well just go for him, as he's a little bit of a safer points returner. But in terms of Sadio Mane, you can actually see that the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm is projecting that Sadio Mane and Mo Salah will score the exact same amount of points. So 6.9 points on paper projected for both of these two. And I think the reason behind this is that 1, it's a great fixture, and 2, Sadio Mane's stats are actually better than Mo Salah's this Premier League season. If you guys did watch the Leeds fixture, he should have at least had a hat-trick with all the chances that he managed to miss. And that just shows you that he's getting in the right positions. And if his finishing was at least a little bit better, he would be on the receiving receiving end of a massive haul in game week 4. So that's why I think Sadio Mane is a fine option to go for, but I'm pretty sure you guys do own Mo Salah and not Sadio Mane. But if you guys do, maybe from a differential point of view, you can also look at the Senegalese, but I think the Egyptian is currently where my armband would be at. So Ronaldo just comes in under them at 6.4, so still a relatively good projected amount of points. I just think in terms of kind of odds of scoring, I think the Liverpool side of things looks slightly better than the United point of view. So this is basically wrap the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. If I didn't cover your talking point, or if you guys do have questions, just drop them in the comments down below. I reply to every comment, so you guys don't have to worry. There's no silly questions or unreasonable questions. Ask away anything. I always will cover it. I'll see you guys for the team selection and the best predicted / top 1000 template video coming up late in the week. I'll be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.